Following what's happening in the United States of America. Again, every day we're seeing the protests on the street. Now, paying closer attention to the news. Now, according to the Washington Post, the editorial board and recently came out with a writing which is entitled, "The Unjust Killing of Alex Preddy Marks a Turning Point in Trump's Second Term." But meanwhile, House Democrats are set to open an open investigation into Homeland Security Kristi Noem as early as next week, laying the groundwork for a push to impeach her. At this moment, that I'm sure that you all have the same question. What is happening to America today? Why are we seeing more protests on the street? And also, what about the chaos in the city of Minneapolis? Now, for the bigger picture, again, as we mentioned before, what's happening in America is directly influencing the world. China, Iran, and also more countries in Europe are also paying closer attention to the domestic affairs. Can what's happening in America today will create or more likely have a bigger impact on the international policies? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to invite our distinguished speaker, again, who's Dr. Michael Patrick. It's a well-known international journalist and traveled extensively. And again, we'd love to hear the input and a deeper analysis from Michael regarding all the details. Well, Michael, and welcome back to The Missing Piece.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely, Michael. Again, such an honor to have you on the show. I feel like every time there's a chaos in the U.S. and we have to bring you back on the show, I hope that next time our conversation, we can talk about something good about the country. Now, as I mentioned before, Michael, we're paying closer attention to the protests and the riots in the city of Minneapolis and also just across the cities in America. They're protesting against ICE and also the Trump administration. Start with a simple question. What do you make of what's happening right now? Why is America today facing more domestic political challenges? Is it because the name Donald Trump, or is it because this year, 2026, is so crucial for the country? Your thoughts?
Well, this is the context is always so important. And Minneapolis is one of the quote, sanctuary cities that brought in a great number of illegal immigrants into the system. They have been walking in recent weeks through issues of finding massive fraud, corporations that really didn't exist, which were funneling money, and a lot of criminal issues that needed to be investigated. That's been going on in the backdrop, but what we have is street protests, and the way in which ICE has been conducting itself is a little clearly unorthodox and not working well with the states it was walking into. And while the federal government believes it has a mandate to remove illegal immigrants, particularly those that have broken the law in a number of ways, and going in and deporting them from the country. The method upon which this has taken place has made matters even worse. Normally in the United States, as in many countries, if police in the normal course of doing their job shoot somebody, there is what we call force investigation. There is an internal affairs group that comes in and investigates it. And there's kind of a separate group of police. In fact, they're disliked by a lot of the rank and file because their job is to keep everything above board and to investigate questionable circumstances. The way in which ICE has been operating, that sort of force investigation has not been a real part of it. So you have a lot of people that are being brought in, becoming part of ICE, that may not have had the adequate training, and certainly what has happened is a real split between the federal forces and the local and state and local forces in terms of police, in terms of managing these circumstances. Protests are normal in the United States, especially in controversial cities, such as a sanctuary city, which really is not in favor of removing illegal aliens from their ranks. And so this goes back to Trump's original mandate. It has had this particular incident that was the latest incident, has a lot of problems with it. I think the Secretary, Kristi Noem, probably didn't handle it particularly well, and I would expect we'll see her resignation soon. But it has complicated the matter in a kind of a battle between state and federal. Now, Donald Trump has spoken on the phone with Minnesota's governor, and they come from completely opposite points of view politically, but they seem to be trying to let the force investigations move forward. Now, that's happening at the state level. At the federal level, the FBI Civil Rights Division is not quite fully engaged on it, although they're trying to. There are some agencies starting to look into it a bit. But this is going to be a tangled web between anytime you have different jurisdictions that aren't really compatible trying to work this problem through. I think it's going to mean it's going to set ICE's operations back a while. The President Trump put a guy that has been running kind of a czar of immigration and put him in charge of this particular one, brought him in because he actually has street cred from back in previous administrations working for Democrats. So he's got a fairly strong reputation, and they're bringing him in to kind of pick up the pieces and try and get the country through this particular point of view. Mm-hmm. But it did not take long to figure out that some inappropriate stuff was happening in this particular instance. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that all of ICE is incorrect, that their mission isn't the right mission. Based on the elections that we last had that put Donald Trump in office. I mean, he won every county in the United States. He won overwhelmingly in popularity, and the voters still want him to deal with immigration, and especially with illegal immigration that's soaking up tax dollars and creating issues. So this problem isn't going away, just that the incidents that we see are creating a flash of protest and violence. And hopefully both sides working together in Minnesota will settle down the violence. And now the state police are moving in, and they're going to be on premises a little bit more. They were held back by the governor. There's some steps in there to try and clean this up, but it's a cleanup mess. Spill on aisle 7. You've got the grocery store's got to get in there and clean it up, and that's really what we're seeing. It can be taken out of context and blown out of proportion, but it will finally get cleaned up. Donald Trump came off a whirlwind at Davos and huge international issues, and I said then, and I say it again, he is going to find himself having to refocus. He says he's the America first president. He's going to have to focus domestically for a while, I think, to get some things back under control.
Well, Michael, again, we are seeing strong reaction from the Democrats. And again, several outspoken Democrats are saying statements such as, we understand Democrats are in a minority, but that doesn't mean that we have to sit on our thumbs and do nothing. And of course, the Democrats expressed their desire to impeach Kristi Noem on a caucuses recently, a demand that received no pushback according to the people familiar with the cases. Michael, we mentioned this before. 2026 is crucial for the country because the midterm election is coming up. And again, President Trump has been strongly rallying the mega bases and believe that the Republicans must learn to keep the base after the midterm election. And again, as you and I were speaking right now, he recently visited the state of Iowa, and then he encountered the voters, and of course, he loved to be the center or the in the spotlight to face the press, answer the questions regarding the domestic and international affairs. So coming back to this point, what message do you think that what happened or what's happening in Minneapolis, and also we're seeing the protests and the riots and push against ICE, are sending the messages to the Democrats? And of course, before even taping the show, you and I, we mentioned about two people, current governor of California, Gavin Newsom, and also the governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro. They're very, very loud, towards Trump and towards the entire administration. Putting everything together, are they ready for 2026 or even, I dare to ask, 2028? Your thoughts?
Well, certainly this is an opportunity for the Democrats to make a move, to establish themselves. The odds of them doing much better during the midterms coming up, I think, is clear. This flashpoint is clearly going to have fallout for the midterm elections. But you're seeing Republicans call for cleanup on aisle 7 right now, especially in Minnesota. So this isn't a party split on how to handle what's going on. Both sides recognize that this needs force investigation thoroughly. And I think we're going to see that intensify as the FBI Civil Rights Division weighs in on it. Because this got completely out of hand with how ICE was handling this. And the first time you think, okay, it was a one-off, but after this last incident, it's not being looked at as a one-off, but a significant problem. That's why I don't think, and especially when I saw Kristi Noem's first answer, she was understandably, as people want to do, which is to defend her people, but quite frankly, meaning ICE. But quite frankly, what she needed to do was to say, I don't know. We need to investigate. We need force investigation here. We need internal affairs. We need, at the state level as well as federal to look into this and get the facts for us. But that's not the impression she left. And so unfortunately, I think she'll be a political casualty in this. But it's not a complete win yet. The Democrats have got to put some people forward that are going to have a voice that not only can represent the protest, but quite frankly, can demonstrate they have a better place to go for the country. That's the challenge they have, is getting a new face and a new message. Gavin Newsom has got more problems than, fleas on a dog out in California. He's got huge issues going on in California. So whether or not he's certainly personable enough, but whether or not he can reinvent himself in time for something beyond the midterms, I don't know. But people are weighing in. They're trying to see how can they capture the imagination of the public. If Trump handles this particular mess in Minnesota well, he can stop the damage, but you can absolutely be certain that the Democrats see it as a wedge issue, as an issue that they can use to expand their influence, not only for the midterms, but beyond. So we'll see. I think the Republicans certainly aren't defending the chaos in Minnesota, though. And that's why you're seeing calls from Republicans as well, echoing what the Democrats are saying in terms of making sure that this is properly and fully investigated and people are held accountable.
Michael, ironically, that we know that today the Republicans and Democrats are heavily divided, but there are a few issues that actually bring the two sides together, which is China. A few Democrats or more Republicans believe that China presents a real threat to the U.S. economically, militarily, and otherwise. You mentioned about President Trump's presence in Davos. of course, that he talked about Greenland. And when he mentioned about Greenland, he actually directly brought China, Russia into the conversation. So which lead me to the next topic on China. Michael, from your perspective, why Greenland? I mean, I think this is still the question that everyone is asking. Why Greenland after Venezuela? What's going to happen to Greenland? And also, why bring China and Russia into the conversation? Donald Trump is the businessman. He knows that if things were in set in April, it's a good possibility that he's going to visit China. Now, by talking about China, by bringing Russia into the conversation while talking about Greenland, that is not going to add more political points for Donald Trump, and simply that China is also watching and paying closer attention to Donald Trump's rhetoric. So again, from your perspective, why Greenland? And how beneficial it is to bring China into a conversation? Your thoughts?
Well, you've touched on a very important issue, and the difference we see in this is that it's got the issue of Greenland exposes a lot of the problems that Europe has, and that's a major part of this discussion as to why was Trump so insistent about quote ownership. And now he seems to be working out some kind of an arrangement with NATO. But it was interesting that Mark Rutte, who is the head of NATO, made a comment to the defense ministers throughout Europe yesterday, and he said, if you think that if you imagine that Europe can defend itself without the United States, you're dreaming. You need to rethink, because that would require all of the states in Europe to more than double their annual expenditures in defense. There's a lot of issues that are internal to the weaknesses in Europe that led to Donald Trump's attitude towards Greenland. Now, I think from a point of view of approach, I'm still a little astonished that much of the story of Greenland was not made public. In other words, when people would ask him, why Greenland, why do you want to own Greenland, what's so important about Greenland, that question could have been answered and should have been answered early on. It wasn't, and we're only now starting to find out what some of the issues were that made it such a sense of urgency. If you were to have they come out and drawn a map of the region and showed where the placement of Russian bases are all the way around in the Arctic, in the northern regions, and also the traffic going on with China and trade, then I think it would have been clear about the need for the United States to have a more significant presence. Now, I'm not talking about whether you call it ownership or however it's fixed. That is not that's not clear that the U.S. has the level of dominance there. And you say, well, you could depend upon your European allies, and people were wondering, why aren't you playing nice with your own allies? Why don't you work with them to come up with a solution for Greenland, if Greenland needs bolstering from a defense point of view? And yet you weren't seeing Trump jump to that, were you? So I think there's a lot to the story that hasn't been clear and involves Europe itself. Perhaps they're making progress on that conversation now because Trump realized it was a losing issue for Trump at home as well as abroad. I mean, Americans were 3-1 against messing around with a bunch of Greenland fishermen, and like, what are you picking on the Greenland fishermen for? That narrative was not properly managed in advance so that people could get a handle on what's going on. And people didn't really want to deal with the issues that put part of the problem here back on Europe, and Great Britain in particular. which is that's a whole new kettle of fish. So that contributed to this challenge. So we can say there is military and strategic value in Greenland. Maybe now they'll start to work it out. But the story it was just kind of like out of the blue Greenland. And so people have no context. And it looks like Trump being a bully again. And so, not that he shouldn't have handled some things differently than he did, but nonetheless, it's an issue that's going to take a while for people to really fully understand and be able to sort it out. And it's really, in many cases, a European issue more than anything else. And Trump is feeling the need to weigh in. But we'll see what Europe has to say and do about this.
Michael, let's bring two politicians or leaders into our conversation. Prior attending Davos, or the meeting at the Davos, the Canadian Prime Minister made a visit to China. Again, that was crucial. Now, for this upcoming week, the British Prime Minister is also scheduled to visit China. On the topic of Greenland, both leaders are rather outspoken, especially towards the US. The Canadian Prime Minister, again, I'm paraphrasing what he said at the Davos. He said, for the middle power, if you don't bring yourself to the table, you might end up being on the menu. However that means, I think he's sending a strong warning to the world regarding Donald Trump's personality and also this global disorder at this moment. Not too long ago, I was reading in an article, again, the author called Donald Trump as a personalist leader, which means that concentrates power around himself and his inner circle. So, Michael, from your perspective, we're seeing Donald Trump and we're seeing the leader of China. Are they ready to meet each other if everything were set happen in April? Is the world ready to be reshaken up again by Trump or by China? What do you think of that?
Well, the whole issue going on involving Canada and its opening up of trade with China, which was the precipitating latest incident. But they're not alone. Trump's kind of like cavalier use of tariffs, almost as punitive methodology of sitting down and communicating with people, has created as much trouble as it's worth. In 6 months from now, there is a major rehashing of the trade agreements between Mexico, Canada, and the United States. And how is that going to be balanced? Trump does not like the fact that Canada is developing its own trade partnerships. But in a way, his style of going about things has invited other countries to go find fresh partners because they're not sure of the stability of their relationship with the United States. This is happening with India and its relationship in Europe. And we're seeing almost a free trade zone come into existence involving India. So it's not simply an issue about China or about India, but it's about the other countries saying, hey, wait a minute, you're not a reliable partner at the moment. We don't know what to expect from you. So we're going to kind of start cutting some deals. I understand the complicated issue regarding trade to the degree that this is why we're seeing Donald Trump, concerned about what's going to happen. And but he's going to have to come to grips with the fact that these countries aren't going to line up the way that he would like it to. And so he's going to have to negotiate with his partners and not just simply bully and threaten, which is how it comes across in a lot of people in trying to analyze this issue. The deal with China is fascinating. I think that she perfectly knows what's happening, as well as Canada. And this is not a surprise. They know part of it is, can China make inroads in Canada and develop stronger trade ties and kind of get around the tariffs issue, and work a deal. It's a pretty clear strategy, but they've got 6 months and they have to kind of sort out what they're going to do here. Trump needs to build better relationships with his partners, and I think as he does that, and if he does that, then some of these controversies will start to settle down. I don't know whether Trump is ready to sit down with Xi any more than she's ready to sit down with Trump right now. I mean, she's got a lot of issues on the domestic front that he's clearly dealing with, and so we'll see how this goes. But I think the relationship benefits if both Xi and Trump can sort out some of the major differences. The sooner the better for both of them.
Michael, I want to wrap up our conversation. Again, let's talk about another urgent issue. Going back to the domestic affairs, 2026 is challenging and it's crucial. People are saying that after the midterm election, it could change not only the fate of America, but also can change the fate of China, for many other countries. Particularly, Michael, from your perspective, I want to talk about NATO. Trump has been very vocal about the role of NATO. Again, another perspective or another crucial issue that we must talk about is the war in Ukraine. Zelensky recently had made strong comments about U.S. commitment to the support to Ukraine, and also Vladimir Putin's desire and also his ambition continue to pose threat to Ukraine. So I want to hear your final thoughts. For NATO, how much do you think, or do you even think it's necessary for NATO countries to continue to work with America without any negotiation, or perhaps there could be room to work better? Because I know that some of the countries, as I mentioned before, are not happy about Donald Trump. But meanwhile, they have to learn to collaborate in order to solve the crisis or the issue in Ukraine. Your final thoughts.
Well, I think the United States has made it clear. They are going to be going through some force reduction in Europe by the United States. Donald Trump has made it clear that if there is a ceasefire of sorts in due season with Russia and Ukraine, that the U.S. does not see itself contributing in a major way to troops on the ground or anything like that in a peacekeeping force. I think the U.S. he's already made it clear the U.S.'s role will be maybe to sell armaments to Europe, who then can transfer them and use them in Ukraine. The real challenge here is really a European question. It's the question that Mark Rutte of NATO was talking to the defense ministers about. How ready are you to provide a real defense? One of the interesting things Zelensky did in his speech, which, by the way, I consider his best speech so far in terms of trying to outline their challenge, he opened with referring to a movie called Groundhog Day, where the main character keeps reliving the same day over and over again. And it seems to lead to nowhere. The challenge is that Russia is not likely to be able to take any more ground in Ukraine. It's losing well over 1,000 soldiers a day. It's not even recruiting soldiers faster at the moment, although it certainly has the authority to do that, but it is not recruiting soldiers at a very fast pace. This is likely a situation where Russia is stuck, and they are facing financial troubles, significant banking and other financial troubles this year. Why he is continuing to pursue Ukraine is kind of anybody's guess, but I suspect at some point he'll want an out, meaning Vladimir Putin will want an out from in a face-saving way in Ukraine. He's not likely to take over Ukraine. But Europe has got to figure out who they want to be when they grow up, because they realize that from everything Putin has said, he's not done, and he has ambitions that include other countries, such as in Europe. So they've got to kind of sort out what they're prepared to do. And so this is really an internal question for Europe. But right now, they're kind of struggling with their own economy. I mean, Germany, one of the best economies there, it really was in trouble in 25. That maybe recovered like a 1.26 increase in GDP. They're really facing some financial troubles as well, and their own issues. So that's where this is at. I don't think it's going to be Trump's issue to solve. People were waiting for Trump to solve it. He's not going to do that. I think the best they're going to be able to do is if Trump launches this, quote, golden dome that he wants to put in Greenland, maybe they'll find a way to do that in a more constructive way, working together. But we'll see. The real issue there is going to be a European one. In trade, to see the progress in trade for Europe, that's going to be important. It's an opportunity for India and for China, to say nothing of China and Canada. That one's going to be more problematic in due season because of the trade agreements between the U.S. And Mexico and Canada. So we'll see.
Well, again, Michael, every time that we talk about not only the domestic but also international issues, you always bring fresh perspective and analysis. As I mentioned in the intro, I'd love to have you back on the show for the next episode. Maybe not something too negative or pessimistic about what's happening in the U.S. Let's bring some positive and positivity into our perspective. Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, such an honor to have Dr. Michael Patrick on the show. I strongly encourage everyone to follow Dr. Michael Patrick's social media posts and also his analysis on the global matters. Again, Michael, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, and let's keep in touch. And again, as I mentioned before, hopefully next time when you and I we have conversation, let's bring something beautiful into our talk. So thank you so much for your time.
Sounds good.